As we go on with Chan Buddhism, I do want to extend the discussion and discussion of Taoism in general, to some extent anyway, to the arts. I feel in some ways, I guess this is true in a lot of religious traditions. For example, um, maybe the best expressions are in the poetry and in the visual arts, especially if you start with the premise that the Tao that can be told is not the true Tao, or that the Tao is ineffable. Maybe you can show it, figure it. Um, Dickinson said that whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. I don't know if you can draw pictures. I don't know what you can do. You can keep talking too, though. I'm not sure if Dickinson was recommending that. But if you were to lapse into silence, that would be all Taoist and Chan, wouldn't it? At any rate, I thought I'd do a little, mini lecture on the Enso, the Zen circle. Unfortunately, this has become a cliche in the West. You kind of see this all over, versions of this actually. If you start looking for Ensos, you might see them on a restaurant sign or something like that. That's Bankei's, just a printout. It's a Japanese form, and really maybe certainly the most elaborate, and I think in many ways the most profound visual expressions of Zen are Japanese. All right, but let's talk a little bit about the Enso. It's a freely hand-drawn with ink brush circle, although Bankei uses two strokes, which is avant-garde Enso. It's often thought of as one continuous stroke, spontaneously produced. There are hundreds of them, thousands of them, through hundreds of years of history. Well, in some ways, it's the best symbol of the Tao, I would say, as understood by Taoists. And again, I'm concerned above all in this Daoism class to show how Chan and Zen are connected to Taoism. This can be overstated, and in another mood, maybe I would try to qualify it. But it comes up again and again profoundly at the center, if you ask me. All right. Maybe I wouldn't qualify it. The yin-yang symbol, which I guess is, if you need a little Taoist emblem, that's it. One criticism I might make of it from a Taoist perspective is that it's too complex. It shows the interdependence of opposites, etc. But it's too busy. The Enso is truly a minimalist work. Hey man, there is nothing comparable in the Western tradition until the 20th century, and really until the late 20th century, and really maybe that is mostly influenced by Zen Buddhism, like John Cage's Silence, for instance, okay? Or some of the monochrome or hyper simple, like say Barnett Newman or something, abstractions that really quite look in some ways like that, like this. Is it a picture? Sure. It's a picture of the moon or anything that has a circular, a tree trunk, anything that has a circular form, more or less circular form. It's not necessarily regular. Is it a piece of calligraphy? It's generally accompanied by calligraphy, which has often the same loose and spontaneous quality, produced right at the same moment, often quoting a verse of poetry, for example, or a koan. But on the other hand, it's not a Chinese ideogram. I mean, it's not exactly calligraphy. Is it painting? It's abstract painting. Where is it? I mean, like I say, it's a picture. It's a symbol. Of course, notoriously in basically many traditions, a circle is infinity. But, if you're trying to show the emergence of being from non-being, for instance, I mean, how about this symbol? Just a circle. At the center is the Tao, absence or empty space, whatever it may be. At the center of all, at the center of I, Banke, I, Matsu, Ikkyu. Now, maybe not Matsu. He's more of a shouter than a drawer. It's okay. So this is, but I mean, in a way, the circle is all too easy to make a symbol of course. But now there's all kinds of features of this now that are distinctive instead of just using, the ring of, this serpent eating its own tail, or the worm Ouroboros, or many other circular patterns in all kinds of mythologies, and actually in philosophical discourse too, the meaning of a circle and infinity, and the complexity of the geometry of a circle. It never ends. Okay, now it's a lovely, but okay, here it's not only a circle, it's a hand drawn, it's a spontaneously produced expression of the person who produces it. Of course, there is no person that produces it, and that's what it says, because we're in no self, or we're in the Tao, and the Tao as self, the absence at the heart of the phenomena, which we could think of as the actual drawn lines, happening spontaneously, though, happening instantly, just as it does, like without conscious guidance is the implication. The best ones, spontaneously, freely, but as they must, they emerge as they must. Again, like maybe a great jazz improvisation. Freely, emerges freely, spontaneously, and as it must, especially as you look back on it. Okay, so let's just, I just want to frame this up a little bit with a couple of passages from the Tao Te Ching characterizing the Tao. You will recall these, but I'll remind you. The Tao is like a well, used but never used up. So maybe this is a picture of a well. It's like the eternal void filled with infinite possibilities, which are emerging. The Tao is like a bellows. This is 5 in the Stephen Mitchell translation. The Tao is like a bellows. It is empty, yet infinitely capable. The more you use it, the more it produces. The more you talk of it, the less you understand. This is kind of a visual correlate of silence, perhaps. Enso. And again, as I say a lot on these occasions, as I sit here explaining it, certainly betraying the whole thing. But, whatever. That's my job. But here, Tao Te Ching 11, which is really, for my money, one of the central verses of the Tao Te Ching. We join spokes together in a wheel, but it is the center hole that makes the wagon move. We shape clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. We hammer wood for a house, but it's the inner space that makes it livable. The inner space. I mean, at a certain point in history, especially Western abstract art, artists started talking about the negative space. I mean, maybe this has been true in sculpture for hundreds of years in the West. And like sculpture identifies a positive space, inhabits a positive space, and thus creates a negative space. But often it was said like a mid-20th century sculpture and painting too, like was about the negative space. The space articulated by the objects occupying the positive space, the occupied space, the unoccupied space. It was a theme. That's a theme of this, for sure. We hammer wood for a house, but it's the inner space that makes it livable. We work with being, but non-being is what we use. Woo. Nothingness, non-being, the Tao, and no self. All right, now, just a couple of books that are really great on, this one on Zen art of Japan in general. These books I'm going to use today, I was trying to figure out how to get PDFs. I was trying to figure out how to get them even they're not in our library. They're quite out of print. I find this disconcerting because this is an outstanding book. Okay, so this is Addis, Stephen Addis, from The Art of Zen, on the Enso. One of the most profound subjects in Zenga, that is the arts of Zen, is the Enso. Especially, the Zen calligraphy and pictorial arts. It would seem that nothing could be more simple than this circle, usually depicted in a single brushstroke. Did the monk merely take a few seconds to create this quintessential Zen statement? Might we also count the time he spent staring at the empty paper and preparing his mind and spirit? Okay, maybe he did. Maybe he didn't know. If I know my Zen masters. Or should we say that it took the monk 80 years, the span of his life, to produce it? If we consider the entire history of Zen, passed on directly from master to pupil for generations, we may even decide that the Enso took many hundreds of years to create. Especially if we get rid of the notion of the self of the artist as what is doing the creating. These issues can be pursued in their cultural context. What has been the meaning of the Enso in Japan? Experts tell us that the circle has been seen as the all, the void, and enlightenment itself. Very few Ensos stand alone. They are usually accompanied by an inscription that may be part of an arcane Zen text or by a line of a poem, such as "My heart is like the autumn moon," or, most simply of all, by the invitation, "Have a cup of tea." Okay, and the way Zen overlaps the tea ceremony, for instance, is quite interesting. But okay, that's a cup of tea. The tea fills the empty space in the cup, which is what is used. But the clay is what you shape or work with to create the non-being, or to shape. I don't know. Are you enclosing a non-being? None of these, however, does more than hint at the indefinable richness of the Zen circle. The meaning of the Enso, therefore, is not fixed, finite, or static. And again, it's got to be stuff like this to be an expression of the ineffable, really. The monk artist has merely begun a process that is reactivated when the painting is seen, leading to various levels of communication and understanding. So one thing might be the function of the Enso in meditation. The Enso could be something to meditate upon. Because the viewer has a vital role in completing the work in his or her spirit, true Zenga embodies the actual experience rather than merely the influence of Zen. So for one thing, you see the physical traces of the artist, who's usually a Zen master in the famous Ensos. As you see the emotional state of Pollock in his brushwork or drip work or de Kooning, like it's present. The gesture, the physical reality is present in a different way than it is if the Zen master teaches you something. And I think it's right to emphasize the role of the viewer here is particularly vivid. Many of the Zen depictions, in particular Japanese Zen depictions, are hyper minimal. Just a few lines, like just the merest outline to make a monk. Like that. Okay. So I mean, it's it's very explicitly like you're invited to fill that in, and you do automatically in some ways. It's hard not it's hard not to see that as a robed monk. I think probably. Okay, here's a charming book. Again, a little hard to obtain right at the moment, seemingly. Enso, Zen Circles of Enlightenment by Audrey Yoshiko Seo. It's a kind of a brief essay on the Enso, and then a collection of classic Ensos in rather lovely reproduction, actually, like small scale, but well reproduced. So anyway, I recommend this book if you can find it. Zen Circles of Enlightenment. Okay, so I'll just read a little bit of her foreword. In Buddhism, there are many examples of the use of the circle. The teachings of the Buddha, the founder of Buddhism, are referred to as the turning of the Dharma wheel, the wheel of reality, samsara, the cycle. In Zen, this metaphor is taken a step further. It is said that when the Dharma wheel turns, it turns in both directions. In Tibetan Buddhism, there is an intricate practice of creating mandalas, circular representations of the universe, and all of its aspects, used as a device for concentrating the mind. But boy, the seeming aesthetics of a Tibetan mandala and of a Zen Enso are quite opposite, right? Like a maximalist versus minimalist. And that is a very good way into the lush cosmology of Tibetan Buddhism and the hyper stripped down, really essence to Daoism kind of cosmology that you get in Zen. The Enso, says Audrey Yoshiko Seo, is perhaps the most common subject of Zen calligraphy, which is a vast genre. It symbolizes enlightenment, power, and the universe itself. It is a direct expression. Okay, so, the universe has exploded from the center. It's in the process of expanding. Maybe. The next one should be looser and bigger. Or maybe it's all going to contract into a dot. Or both. Or cyclically. Thusness, or the moment as it is. It is a direct expression of thusness. Enso is considered to be one of the most profound subjects in Zen painting, and it is believed that the character of the artist is fully exposed in how he or she draws an Enso. Again, I mean, this is straight up anticipation of abstraction, expressionism. If you looked at this as art instead of just a meditative exercise. And why wouldn't you? You know, it's both, I think. Some artists practice drawing an Enso daily as a spiritual exercise. Although the form of the Enso is quite simple, its essence is difficult to grasp or define. On one hand, it's just a circle painted with one brush stroke and a single breath. On the other hand, it is the representation of the totality of the great void. Some say that the Enso has no fixed meaning. That's why I'm saying, like, this whole rap I'm doing is kind of to betray it. But, I mean, one way to get to this no fixed meaning is multiplying meanings. Right? It means, what doesn't a circle mean? But again, we're talking about hand-drawn ink circles of a certain kind. So what do those fail to mean? Others insist that it encompasses and conveys a continuing and ceaseless action through all time. When an Enso painting is viewed, it communicates and can be appreciated on various levels depending on the spiritual maturity of the viewer. The Enso ranges in shape from perfectly symmetrical to completely irregular, with brush strokes either thin and delicate or broad and massive. Many Enso paintings include a short text or in prose or verse called san. San? San. S-A-N. San are composed either by the artist or someone commenting on the image as a way of deepening and clarifying the religious and spiritual content of the work. Enso paintings act as visual and poetic koans, apparently paradoxical statements, questions, or demonstrations that point to or suggest the nature of reality. They reflect the artist's understanding that at their best, words and images cannot express the truth completely. That's one reason that you go to abstraction, perhaps, if that's what's happening. In attempting to assist others in realizing the true nature of reality, rather than explaining, the masters point as directly as they can. Again, maybe Wittgenstein would insist on that. I'll just, I'm not too sophisticated making visuals. I'm going to show you some of the lovely Ensos reproduced in Seo's book. This is the earliest one. I'm showing you the first few. Correct. Look how quick, how spontaneous. They are quite different from one another. Very distinctive of the style of the person making them. Very personal in their expression, which is interesting too. They make the cosmic completely personal, express it in a particular human gesture. The inscription or san on the on this one by Jito is 2 lines of the poem by the Chinese poet Han Shan, who is in our book, in The Roaring Stream, known as Stone House, the great Chan poet. The full poem says, "My heart is like the autumn pool, pure as a blue-green My heart is like the autumn moon, pure as a blue-green pool. No, this comparison sucks. How can I explain? Now that is some good-ass Zen shit, all right? My heart is like an autumn moon. What the fuck, you know? Like, how inadequate is that, like, this cliche that I just threw out at you? This one's called Autumn Moon. The point isn't to be able to perfectly hand draw a circle, like Giotto was famous for being able to do. Freehand, perfect circle. This is Hakuin, one of the greatest of Zen masters and Zen teachers. In the Linji Rinzai tradition, that's the primary source for the Enso. How entirely rough. Well, I could keep going. Here is a better look at the Bankei version, which, like I say, is avant-garde in using 2 strokes, which makes it all the more yin-yang, perhaps. Or suggests that if there is if the Enso is in circular motion, it's going both ways at once. All right, well, I'm not sure how useful that was, but I enjoyed talking about that for a moment anyway. I will see you in class in some form next week as we all get vaccinated and maybe things return to normal slowly. See ya.